Welcome back. This is the second part of a multi-part series about power, electrical power aboard. I realize most of the people who watch this probably don't own a North Sea, so I'm hoping that what I say translates into something that you can use aboard your boat also. Now, first off, if you haven't watched it, go back, watch video number 1 in the series, and the disclaimer. Just want to make sure you're covered and we're covered. So today's discussion, or what I'm going to show you and talk about, is storage of power aboard. How do you store your electric aboard your boat? I.e. batteries. You know, what type of batteries you're going to use, how many, where you place them, things like that. When we went and started going cruising, there were 3 types of batteries that we could choose from. Right now there are 4. Each have pluses, each have minuses. So the first one to talk about, I guess, would be the wet cell batteries. Been around forever. Absolute known commodity. Lowest in cost. Easiest to replace if you're going full foreign, as we planned on doing. You want to be able to use what you can get in a remote area if you lose your battery or batteries, or if you need one. Easiest to replace. So I looked at the pluses on these. Low cost. Of all the types of batteries, these are the lowest ones. Again, I'm using cheater cards to make sure I don't miss something. Easy to get in different areas. A known commodity. You can dip them with a gauge and tell your absolute charge state by the acid in them. Which brings me to the downside. Acid in the batteries. That acid can eat a lot of things. It can hurt people. That acid is also known for outgassing. If you get a wave into the boat, it outgasses chlorine. Not good. You don't want to be around that. The other downside, and I'm just going over generalities here, the other downside is they're more maintenance. You have to check the water every now and then. You have to equalize them every now and then. I can personally attest to cooking off probably 2 sets of batteries that it was my fault. I destroyed them. It was before we moved aboard. We were at a dock. I left the charger on. They cooked off. I destroyed them. So that's the wet cells. The next step that I looked at was AGM, absorbed glass mat. The plus sides to these are no maintenance. Easy to use, easy to put in, no spillage of acid unless for some reason you put a hole in the battery by accident. So, and you can place them around the boat, different areas. Now, the downside, higher cost. That's it. One of the other plus sides is, in a pinch, if you have to replace one, and you've got more than one battery in your bank, you can replace it with a wet cell. Not recommended, not the best thing, but it's possible to do. Number 3 is the gel cells. These were sweet looking. In that no battery box is required. There's no maintenance required. They're easy to place anywhere in the boat. You can even place them on their side. They don't have to be upright. A lot of benefit there. downsides, they're higher cost than the AGM. At least they were at the time we were shopping around. And the other big downside that for my personal thing was we were going foreign, or planned to, and we did. They can't be mixed with wet or AGM. So if you have gel and you have a battery bank, 2, 4, whatever, and one of the gel cell will go bad, you can't replace it with an AGM or wet cell. You can't mix the two. The charging is very different. And if you charge to a wet, you'll damage the gel. If you charge to a gel, you damage the wet. So that was a major downside for me. The last one that I want to talk about is just coming out now, and that's the nickel metal hydride, the super batteries. On the plus side, they look great, no doubt, and they're coming along leaps and bounds thanks to cars, electric cars. What we're doing with electric cars is really helping the boat side too. They can be placed anywhere. They're very lightweight, which is another bonus. You're not weighting down your boat with a lot of weight. You can put them up higher. Good things. They charged fast. You can charge them up really quickly, and you can discharge them very low without damaging them. You know, all of those things are great. And things that you really want. The downside. We're talking astronomical cost compared to the other three. And because they're brand new, they'll come down in cost. The other downside is if you look around, you will see that if you don't do everything absolutely correctly, you got your very own small nuclear device. They just look at the Samsung phone, look at other areas around. So you've got to be more careful with them if you go that route right now. Now, I know a couple of cruisers that I talked to that have put them on right now, and they're using them, and I'm anxious to see how they work out. I'll let it go at that, and if they come out good, I'll put a link to their site too. Now, looking at all of those things, we decided going foreign, possibly losing a battery along the way, and what would we do? What ifs. We always play what ifs. Even when we're sitting in the cockpit and sailing, we do what ifs. What if that broke? What if that happened? What would we do? Who would take charge? Who would do what? So it came down to the AGM batteries were what we went with. Now, a little info. Batteries come in different sizes. So we looked at what size, and we decided on a group 31. That's bigger than what a normal car is, which is like a group 24 or group 27. Each battery holds, when we bought them, 105 amp hours at the rated usage. For history, we installed the first set of batteries in 2002. And they lasted until 2012. That's what I consider to be a pretty good run for a set of batteries. I got my usage out of them, and that included many years of full-time living aboard with nothing but solar power to charge them. Occasionally we'd pull into a marina. I'm not saying never doing it, but they lasted very well. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is battery bank size. When you're deciding to put your batteries in your boat, you really have to think it out, because all of these things, like everything in cruising, everything in sailing, is a compromise. What can you fit? What do you want to fit? What, all of those things. So we went with group 31s, and I installed this box to house some of the batteries. So there are barrel bolts that keep our companionway in place, and when the companionway is in place, it holds the front of the box here in place. This is the door to our engine compartment, and there's a board across the bottom that I put on, and when you take this door off, that holds the back of the battery box in place. So at sea, everything is locked in place by barrel bolts, but easy to come off. Then you can just lift off the battery box cover, and you can see I have a place for tools here. And these are our batteries. This is number 3, this is number 2, this is number 1 battery. And if you'll notice, it's an AGM, it doesn't require a box, but the box remains in case I needed to replace one of the AGMs with a wet cell. I could use this battery box to keep it there. I've got a temperature gauge that tells me engine room temperature, and my charging devices are up here. So we went with group 27 because I made up a cardboard mock-up of the batteries, and I put them there to see how they would fit. If I went to group 24, they would be smaller, but my bottom step was too short, unless I built it out and wasted space. If I'd love to have 2 8Ds, great big 8D batteries, but we still want to sleep aboard when we went cruising, so they wouldn't fit. Now, with 105 amp hours in each of these batteries, and over the period of time that we're full-time cruising, we could go 3 days or so without charging. And that would only be drawing the batteries down to 50% depth of discharge. We used our gauge up there to determine how much we were drawing out. And other than 1 or 2 times during being at anchor for a hurricane, we never dropped below 50% depth of discharge. Keeps the batteries living a lot longer. Now I do have one other battery, I gotta say. It's also an AGM, and it is smaller. It's a group 27, and it's in the back of the engine room, and that's used strictly for starting the engine. So even if I lost my house batteries all the way down, I could still start the engine in case I needed to. I have not one switch for master switch for 1, 2, both, off. I have a single master switch here for the house bank. In the aft cabin, I have a single switch identical to this that turns on the battery for the engine start. So I have to go to the aft cabin before I can start the engine. And I have one single switch like this that connects the 2 banks, the single start battery and the house bank, together so that I can have the power of both of those together. Now, when you decide on where you want your batteries, you really want to put them as low as possible if you're using wet, AGM, or gel. They're heavy, very heavy, so you want that weight as low as possible. I tell you a story. When we were getting ready to cruise the marina we were in, there was a number of boats getting ready to cruise. And we had a friend who had a much bigger boat. And he was doing batteries at the same time I was doing batteries, so I got mine put in. And he's coming down the dock one morning. I'm going to work. He's retired, so he's not working. He's an engineer. Great guy. And he's got one of those rolling carts, you know, the big carts, and he's rolling down the dock like 2 8D batteries. And as I'm going to work, I'm passing him, I'm going, boy, that's a lot of batteries. And he said, yeah, and I got 2 more up in the car. So I go to work, and I'm not thinking anything. I come back to the marina, park my car, and as I get out of my car to come down onto my dock, his boat was across from us and down a little bit. I look, and I'm going, boy, that's strange, because I look, and my mast is like this, and as I look down there, his mast was like this. He was an engineer, but he was tunnel visioned. He had put 4 8D batteries in the settee locker. So obviously he had to change his mind on how he was going to store his batteries. Now, once more, I've got to mention, I can't express strongly enough how important it is to have a gauge, if you're going cruising, to tell you what your battery bank is doing. Without it, you're sort of like the old Volkswagens about 100 years ago. You young people won't understand this, where there was no gas gauge in it. There was just a little lever down on the floor that it had a little reserve tank that could get you 10 miles or 15 miles. And when you ran out of gas, you kick that over and then go some more miles. That one of the first cars I ever owned, low cost. And occasionally I'd kick that lever, run out of gas. I'd just be out of gas because the lever was not far from the gas pedal. Telling on myself there. The second thing I want to reiterate is cable size, and this applies to batteries also, and cable length. This applies to batteries and how you wire your boat. You want bigger than you have to be if you can at all fit it, and you want your cable length to be as short as you can. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how people wire their boats. Now, some people use golf cart batteries. Cool. They have, for their size, they have a lot of amperage, a lot of use, but they only come in 6 volts, so you wire one 6-volt battery positive to the negative of another 6-volt battery, and then you go from that positive to the circuit breaker panel and from the negative to ground. So you're getting 12 volts when you run them in series. Now, the other way to wire a battery, if you get 12-volt batteries like I did, is to wire them in parallel. So you're getting all of the power out of them, but you're maintaining the 12-volt system. So our 12-volt batteries are wired in parallel. Now, there's actually 2 different ways to wire your batteries in parallel. The way most people wire their batteries in parallel is you have a circuit breaker and you have a ground. And they wire the positive from the battery to the circuit breaker, from the first battery, and the ground to the ground. Then you wire the positive terminal from battery number 2 to the positive terminal of battery number 1, and the same with the negative. And then you wire the third battery, positive terminal, to the positive terminal of the second battery, and the same with the negative terminal. That is well and good. That is parallel, and that's what most people do. Fortunately, when I was working on spacecraft, I had the luxury of having a bunch of rocket scientists around and some very competent, outstanding electrical engineers. Now I'm going to tell you, remember I said that the length of the cables should be as short as possible. I'm going to give you the exception to that rule. The way we wired our batteries is I added a terminal block before the circuit breaker and after the batteries for the positive and the negative. I then went to battery number 3, the farthest battery from that terminal board as the electrical cable run goes, and I wired the positive terminal to the positive terminal board and the negative terminal to the negative terminal board. I then measured the length of those two cables. Now to wire battery number 2, I wired the positive terminal to the positive terminal board, the negative to the negative terminal board. And I made that wire the same length and size as the one from the third battery. As an example, we'll call it 36 inches. I then wired battery number 1 with that 36-inch cable to the terminal boards. Now, that leaves me excess cable, but all 3 batteries are now truly in parallel. The old style of connecting them up, that battery number 1 gets hit the first. So it gets a draw on it faster than battery number 3. When you're charging, you smack power into that first battery before you smack power into the third battery. So your batteries will not last as long. Now, if you don't believe me, you can wire them up and get a temperature sensor there and sense battery number 1 and battery number 3 and check it out. But that is, in my estimation and in my rocket scientist friends, the best way to wire them. By the way, this entire box, and this is just a spacer to hold the batteries in place. And this entire box is held on with some screws down here and comes out so that the engine can come out forward. So it can all be removed, and has been on a number of occasions when I had to do some major engine work and pull it out and put it back in. Well, now that I talked about how our ship's batteries work, if you're interested in more information about those other little pesky batteries that keep running around the boat, the AA, AAA, C, and D, and what you can do with those, I'll put a link in the description down below, right down there, on another video that covers those type batteries. So much for this video. The next video, the third and final in the Power Aboard series that I've just done, will be on generating power to use aboard. What we did, what worked for us. And it will cover the charge system that we use and what we're going to, what we went with, what worked, and what we're going to go with that we feel is a better option. So, as always, thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Hit the like button if you are not subscribed. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to continue, and make sure you get alerted when the next video comes out in this series and the rest of them. Hit the little bell next to it. We appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.